is how you're going to judge the success of the project ultimately. So organize the information, and your designer can help you do this. Organize the information into distinct buckets, whether you've got marketing and communication objectives, whether you've got who your audience is, functional, logistical, budgetary. Develop those questions and be as detailed as possible, because you can never have too much information in a planning phase of the process of a project. The third thing is to establish a common vocabulary, and I have an anecdote about that. I was designing interiors of a hospital many years ago in San Francisco, and in the discovery phase, we finally got to talking to the hospital administrators about their own office space. And so I came to the office with my colleague, and we sat down and started asking one of the administrators, well, about color. What are your color preferences? And she said, well, you know, I like earth tones, but no purple. I don't like purple. And I'm looking at her, and she's got purple glasses on, and she's wearing a purple sweater. And so I'm trying to figure out, all right, obviously purple means something very different to her, and I needed to get to the bottom of that. And the point was that people perceive things very differently, and it's the job of the designer and whoever's responsible for that to make sure that we're talking about apples to apples. So there are tools to do that. When in your discovery phase, you'll get a list of themes and objectives, and what you need to do is to somehow visually match those themes with something, with the words with images. So you can go through an exercise where you select a bunch of images and with the words, and then have the group identify them and link them. So that becomes the vocabulary for the project, so that when someone says, I want it to be high-tech, we all know what high-tech means because we have a reference point. So until you can do that, it's very difficult to move forward, because you can spend a lot of time and energy and be off the mark because you're talking a different language. The next point is to have a point of view. When George Clooney was interviewed on Inside the Actors Studio, James Lipton asked him, what's the most important thing about directing? And without hesitating, he said, you have to have a point of view. So it means that you have to establish that lens through which you're going to view, your audience is going to view your show. So as directors of trade show exhibits, you need to establish that same point of view moving forward. You need to decide things like, is it edgy, or is it safe and secure? Am I strong and imposing, or is it open and inviting? You need to establish that from the beginning, so that as you move forward, it answers all the questions that you have along the line, because you say, well, does it look right through that particular lens? And it will ultimately clarify your voice. Number 5 is to open up. And what I mean by that is that in order to really develop an exciting and dynamic exhibit, you need to get out of your comfort zone. It means that you shouldn't go in with preconceived notions about what it should be. You need to be open to anything, because a good design team will stretch you, and they'll get you to think in ways that you hadn't thought before. But you have to loosen up to be able to do that. And there are exercises for that as well. Oftentimes you say, let's go take a field trip, let's go to museums, let's go to a show. Go to Las Vegas and look at what's happening there. Go to other shows in other industries to see what they're doing. It's very important to get out of your own perspective on it and open up to new ones. This isn't personal. You're not designing your house when you do this, and this is sort of an important point. So it's important to have some sensibility to design or flair to design, but unless you are the capo di capo, it doesn't really matter, because you're designing from a very discrete set of objectives that you determine up front in the project. And so you need to put that in focus and make sure that it is meeting those objectives and not just personal preferences. But like I said, having a sense of design and creativity is very helpful, because it can help you in the communication of the project and understanding and working with the design team. But objectivity is key, because without it, you run the risk of putting a family room on a high-tech medical convention floor. The next thing is focus. And I can't say how many times I've had it requested to me that, well, we want it to look just like Apple. And usually I respond by saying, that's fine, but if you are willing to be maniacally focused on a singular vision, then you need to take a step back from that. And you need to focus on what is that one singular impression that you want to leave with your audience in their experience. And so you find what the heart of the story is, and you stick to it. Oftentimes you want to put a lot of things and a lot of messages, and it ultimately just confuses the people. So if you want to get that clarity that's so refreshing to customers, you need to be very disciplined about your approach to it and your messages, and stay focused on that. Number 8 is compare against the objectives. So I keep going back to the discovery phase, which is where we determine, you know, the map for the design process. And in the creative process, a lot of new ideas will come up, and it's important to put in benchmarks in the process to go back to what you initially said you're going to do, and make sure that these sketches and these great ideas or these additional things that you've come up with are still meeting those objectives. And you need to do that throughout the process, and you need to do it soon enough so that you can adjust it. Because once you get all the way down to final design and documentation, it then becomes very difficult to try to change it. So constantly compare against the objectives that you have set up early on in the process. The 9th thing is to go all in. And designing a trade show exhibit is really an important endeavor, and it's not one that happens every day. There are a lot of moving parts to it, and in order to make it successful, you have to really commit the time to it, and figure out how to spend the time not only with your own internal constituents, but with the design team itself, and make sure that you have the room to do it properly, because ultimately the time that you put into it will really pay off in the end. It is a tremendous amount of work, it's a lot of fun, but you have to dedicate the time to it. The 10th point is to be brutal. Now this might seem odd to you coming from a designer, but design is a service profession. A good designer doesn't have to be a prima donna. Actually, quite the contrary. If the design that they're creating isn't working, it needs to stop, and you need to start over. It's not, you shouldn't be concerned about hard feelings with that, because again, it's a service that we're providing. And a design isn't precious. It needs to be able to withstand the fires of hell before it goes on the trade show floor, because frankly, your job depends upon it. And that's the responsibility of the design team to make sure that it's hitting the mark and meeting the objectives. So that's why in this process that I'm talking about, a pure beauty contest to choose a design can be a recipe for disaster. Without the proper creative development, it can become subjective and arbitrary. Then it will not fully meet the objectives that you set up in the outset. So you want to be able to hit your target squarely. You need to be really brutal about it, and get what you pay for out of the design. And the 11th point of the 10 points is to have fun. Developing a trade show exhibit and program is a very creative endeavor. And as such, it should be fun. You're creating something from nothing, and it's a journey. It's an exploration. It becomes very personal, and like with any endeavor where you're in the trenches for a period of time, you wind up making associations with people that frankly can last you a lifetime. So it's most important to have fun. It will be reflected in the final result. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes.